What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another FPL video on Fantasy Football Scout. It's Transfer Watch ahead of Game Week 4. So in this one, as always, going to look at some of the most popular transfers in, some of the most popular transfers out, comment on whether we think that's a good idea, who players might be looking to bring in instead, that kind of thing. And there's been a lot of transfer activity. We saw price changes on Saturday night, players going up and down that hadn't even played yet. And we still haven't even finished the game week yet. We've still got 2 matches to come tonight. So let's jump into it and start off with the first player. Jamie Vardy first. Look at the smile on his face after a hat-trick against Man City. 137,428 transfers in already, and I expect that to go up and up and up, especially as we see Werner being transferred out, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, he did go off with a little bit of a knock. He was kind of holding his groin for a lot of the second half, but Brendan Rodgers has come out and he should be okay. He said Vardy's, I think, will be fine. He's just got this hip issue, which has been ongoing. It normally settles down after a few days, and then he works himself back into the game. He just has an impingement on his hip, so we think he'll be fine. So it sounds like something he's had for a little while. We do sometimes see this, especially with players as they're getting a little bit older, maybe have injuries and they're not able to train as much or play as long, and they have to take a bit of a rest in between. So hopefully he should be okay for the next game. So if you're thinking about bringing him in, it's not the worst time to do it. Obviously, massively inflated by penalties. Interestingly, the 2 penalties he got against Man City were nothing to do with the handball rule. It was just 2 players brought down. So that's not really a huge issue. Vardy himself was brought down for the first one. And to be fair, he could have had a 3rd penalty as well if he was still on the pitch towards the end when they got another one. So a bit of a crazy time. He's had 6 shots in the box in 3 matches. That includes the penalties, by the way. 5 shots on target, and he scored 5 goals. Absolutely insane. Can these penalties continue? We just don't know at the moment. It could just be huge variance, which is why we're getting so many. Obviously, the handball rule is affecting it a little bit, although not all the penalties given has been because of that. And we've heard before that he's a bit of a stat buster. We've seen that in previous seasons. He doesn't necessarily need to be heavily involved in the game. He pops up, he's clinical when he gets his chances, and we saw that again. His second goal was a great finish at the near post and an assist from Castagna. So he's looking pretty good. I don't think it's the worst transfer to be bringing in. I mean, first of all, he's just scored 5 goals, so confidence will be high. But more importantly for me, the fixtures are good. West Ham at home, Villa at home, Arsenal away, Leeds away. They're 4 decent enough fixtures to bring in someone like Vardy. And surely he's got to start scoring from open play more often as well as having the penalties in his locker. So can he keep up what he's done so far? Probably not, but it doesn't mean he's not going to get more shots and, ultimately still carry on scoring goals. And we know what kind of a streaky player he is. So I quite like the transfer in. And he was overlooked quite heavily by a lot of us, including myself, for Werner. And a lot of people are probably making that switch now. So I think it's an okay transfer in if you've got the money. I don't know if I would rip my team apart to be able to fit him in. But if you've got enough money to move from one of your strikers to him, I think it's a good transfer. So sticking with Leicester, unsurprisingly popular after beating Man City 5-2. And Castagna, who's been playing right back, 125,773 transfers in. Now, part of the reason for why he's been doing so well is even though they've not been keeping clean sheets, he's been smashing the attacking returns. So he already has 4 attacking returns in 3 games. Is that sustainable? Probably not for a fullback. But his numbers overall are actually quite good if you're into that kind of thing. So last season at Atalanta, his expected goal involvement was 0.21 per 90 minutes. Now that sounds quite low, but you've got to remember he's a fullback. To put that into perspective, Doherty last year, who was seen as essential at times, was 0.22. So Castagna's already at 0.18 playing in this role for Leicester. So he is quite an attacking fullback. My only kind of issue right now or concern with him is James Justin can be brought for a lot less. So if you're getting Leicester for clean sheets, obviously James Justin covers them for less money. He's probably not as attacking as Castagna, but the money you save, which is what, like 0.9 million, 1 million. It's a decent chunk of change to then spend elsewhere. So that's probably why I wouldn't be looking at bringing him in right now. Not to say these transfers in are bad, because like I just talked about with Jamie Vardy, the fixtures are pretty good and Leicester are a very good defensive team. Of course, Ndidi's missing as well now. That might be a bit of an issue, but Mendy's in there playing, and they've got Evans back as well. Now, he also went off with a little bit of a knock. Hopefully he'll be okay for the next game. If he is, then Leicester defence looking pretty good for the next few fixtures. So I don't mind this transfer in. I just find it hard to bring him in for that much money where you can get James Justin for less. I appreciate when Ricardo's back, that might be an issue for Justin. We could see Castagna move over to the left and Ricardo play right. But right now we just don't know. We don't even know when Ricardo's going to be back. So James Justin looks a great bet. Castagna's decent, but obviously don't be expecting 4 returns in 3 games. Has there been more of a roller coaster ride so far this season than Son? Transferred heavily out, scores 4 goals, transferred heavily in to the point where he goes back up to 9.1 million from 8.9. And now he's got an injury, so he's had 309,000 transfers out already, and we don't yet know how long it's going to be, but Mourinho has said a while. Now, what he means by a while, we don't know. If it was only 3 weeks, for example, not 3 game weeks, but 3 actual weeks, there's an international break coming up, so you might actually only miss 1 fixture. My worry is if it's a hamstring injury, we've seen this with Pulisic, he's had one, it's like, well, he's back and now he's not, and then he's back and now he's not. And these things can take their time. So obviously, if you've not already made the transfer, you could just wait and find out exactly how long it's going to be. But if it is more than like a couple of games, like 2 or 3 games, absolutely must get rid, because it's just too much money to be holding at this stage of the season. It's obviously a massive blow for Spurs as well. And owners consider themselves extremely unlucky, right? He should have scored more. I mean, Spurs XG for that game, 2.95. They only scored 1 goal. So it shows you how close they came to getting a bigger haul. And yeah, it's a huge frustration. But the good thing is he's 9.1 million, which means you have got a lot of options you could go to. So I've written some down here. And you don't have to spend all that money, by the way. I know it's very tempting to do that all the time when we have like 9-10 million to spend. Doesn't mean you always have to spend it. Whether or not you use that money to, you know, put elsewhere in your team this week, or you save it for next week, whatever it might be, there are other options. So I still wouldn't write Wolves off just yet. I know they just had an awful performance against West Ham. West Ham very good, by the way, but not expecting that from Wolves. But Podence, if he's back fit, could still be an option, and Traore on that right wing as well. So you could look there. Fixtures for Wolves, very good. Fulham, Leeds, Newcastle, Palace up next. Harvey Barnes, I really like the look of. Didn't get any points against Man City, but looked very good and has already got points this season. And again, fixtures like for Vardy and Castagna, we've already talked about quite a lot. West Ham, Villa, Arsenal, Leeds. So again, he looks really good. You save a lot of money there as well, like 2 million. That can then be put elsewhere. So he's someone I would definitely be looking at if you're not worrying about spending all 9 million right now. James Rodriguez, I still think is a good buy. I know he didn't get any points this week. Annoyingly not on penalties. I was hoping for that, secretly hoping for that, but it hasn't happened. But still, Brighton, Liverpool, Southampton, Newcastle. We've seen Newcastle defence still looks bad. Southampton's defence isn't great. Liverpool's obviously a tough game, but Brighton at home is not a bad fixture either. So I actually think the fixtures are quite good for James Rodriguez. So I still like him. Or if you want to jump to Man City, bearing in mind they were extremely good against Wolves and then poor against Leicester, you'd hope for the majority they'll still be really good. There's Foden or Mahrez. Obviously, if you've got the money to go to De Bruyne or Sterling, fair enough. But most people haven't got 2.5 million sitting in their bank. So I still like Foden or Mahrez. I think the one thing that worries me is Man City without a main striker. It all sounds good, the false nine, etc. But I think it is a big miss. Now, it doesn't mean Sterling's always going to play there. They could play De Bruyne false nine, Foden false nine, whoever it might be. But you just got to think going forward, Man City are not going to continue to be that bad, and they've got the fixtures as well. And Foden's a big saving. Mahrez is a little bit of a saving as well. They're definitely players I would look at. And unless they're going to bring more people in, but they've got quite a few injuries at the moment, unless they're going to bring more players in, those two, Mahrez and Foden, are probably going to get more minutes than they've ever got, at least over the, you know, in the short term before Jesus and Aguero is back. So I think they both look like great options. I wouldn't write any teams off just based on what happened in Game Week 3. We've been saying that all season. Don't write them off for Game Week 1, 2, 3. And things change all the time. Like Man City great, then Man City bad. Who knows how good they'll be going forward. So there's lots of options for Son. I would definitely be transferring out, I think, because there's always that worry that even if it's just one game week, actually then it turns into more and more and more. And it's Man United up next for them anyway, so it's not the biggest miss. So yeah, I like this transfer out. Loads of options. Let me know in the comments below who you're going for. Werner definitely goes down as probably the most frustrating player that I've owned since Game Week 1. It just hasn't worked out for him, right? It just hasn't clicked. And I do think we overlooked some things, which I'll talk about in a minute. He's had 312,252 transfers out already this week, and only 1 assist in the opening 3 games. Now, you can put that down to, you know, the Liverpool game was kind of a write-off, 45 minutes with 10 men, etc. But they still played Brighton and scored 3 goals. They still scored 3 goals against West Brom. So 6 goals, he's only got 1 assist involvement. Obviously, if Jorginho had put the penalty away against Liverpool, it would have been an extra assist, but it's just not good enough for a player that was costing 9.5 million, now has come down to 9.4. Now, you could say he was a little bit unlucky against West Brom. He did hit the bar from a pretty decent chance. And again, had that gone in, would that have opened the floodgates for him? It just, from watching Chelsea, it's just not clicking. There's just too many changes. I think that's something that I overlooked. So we thought Pulisic would start Game Week 1. He didn't. He's still out. Ziyech is still out as well. We've seen Werner line up centrally and then on the left. And then he started on the left versus West Brom, but he moved to the right in the second half. And Lampard's just changing too many things. Havertz started on the right first game. He's played more centrally. Well, he played false 9 against Liverpool, and then he's kind of playing number 10 role against West Brom. So there's lots of changes. Tammy Abraham's not playing. Then he's back into the team. Hudson-Odoi is getting some minutes here and there as well. You know, Alonso made some mistakes. It's just, there's too many changes. There's lots of new players. And at some point, Chelsea, I'm sure, are going to click and do really well. Like, really expect them to do great things this season. But until those players are back and they've got a settled side, because one thing we did see from Lampard last year is when he was happy with players, when they were performing well, he didn't really take them out of the side that much. But in the next game, if Pulisic or Ziyech are back, you see them come in, they're going to move players around. Like, if Pulisic comes in on the left, where does Werner go? Does he go back centrally? Is Havertz going to play in 10? Is Chilwell going to come in at left back and Alonso's going to miss out? All these things to think about. So, is this a good transfer in or a good transfer out? This is probably the one. Sorry, not transfer in, but is it a good move to be transferring out? This is probably the one where I'm most kind of torn on it because I own him as well. Crystal Palace at home, Southampton at home next. If they get a few players back, will that kind of change things? Like, let's be honest, they are scoring goals. He just hasn't been on the end of one yet. And he's too good a player for that to kind of keep happening for. A lot of people are moving for Danny Ings and Raul Jimenez, and I can kind of see it. And I am leaning that way too, because that also gives me money to upgrade in midfield, which I'm sure a few people are looking at doing as well. And we know the likes of Jimenez just tick over. Ings is on penalties as well, and he's just going to tick over. West Brom at home next looks like a fantastic fixture. So I can see why people are getting him out. I certainly wouldn't begrudge it. But is it worth just giving him a couple more games after the international break? Will Chelsea have all their players back fit and raring to go? I don't think he's a must sell, but I can absolutely see why people are doing it, and I don't think it's a bad transfer out. But with the international break just around the corner, I just wonder, could we give him one more game against Palace, save a couple of transfers, and then reassess afterwards and then see what we feel like? The only issue with that is, which is in the back of my mind, if he doesn't get anything against Palace, it's going to be huge amount of transfers out again over a 2-week break where you don't want to make early transfers in case something happens, and you got to watch that price fall and fall. If he doesn't get anything against Palace, he could be 9.3, 9.2 by the end of the international break, and that's a little bit of a worry on why I'm considering moving him on. But let me know in the comments below, if you're a Werner owner, what are you doing with him? But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please do hit that like button if you're enjoying this series. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Help us hit that next target of 60,000 subscribers. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these transfers? Are they wrong? Should Castagna be brought in? Can Jamie Vardy keep up these amount of penalties? Who are your Son replacements? Who are your Werner replacements? Or are you keeping faith with Werner? Let me know in the comments below. We'll be back tomorrow with more FPL videos. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell if you haven't already. And I'll catch you soon.